Welcome learners. This video is the second part about Jarawas of South and Middle Andaman. It talks about the life and cultures of the Jarawas as well as throws light on the threat and atrocities committed towards the Jarawa tribe.
Isolated tribes, touching message for the modern world.
Their cry to the outside world can be heard saying, "Leave us alone." It has been often alleged that the Jarawas are hostile by nature and that they attack people from other tribes or communities. They are stereotyped as naked, carrying bows and arrows, ready to shoot anyone and everyone. However, that is not the whole truth. It has been observed that the Jarawa are not hostile by nature and that they do not attack anyone without reason. They attack only in self-defense or retaliate when they feel that their resources are being encroached upon. Sarkar in the year 1990 reports that the Jarawa and the non-Jarawa encounters are not very uncommon. According to him, ever since the British tried to establish friendly contacts with the Jarawas during the second penal settlement between the year 1858 to 1946 and later on by the authorities of the Andaman administration, there was no real breakthrough. Contrary to the non-Jarawas, the Jarawas maintained a tense relationship with the non-Jarawas. These were some of the experiences of the past between the Jarawas and the non-Jarawas.
It is observed that the Jarawa situation during penal settlement was better than during the second penal settlement.
True, earlier a friendly relationship prevailed between the Jarawa and the British. During the first settlement, Colebrook in the year 1789-90 and Blair in the year 1789-96 came in contact with the Jarawa. Their identity as a separate tribe was not known. Colebrook met the Jarawa in December 1789 at Dundas Point. He kept a wounded person on the ship Ranger for 3 weeks, went up the Bumlitan Creek as far as Bumlitan and met another Jarawa and at Mount Pleasant Hill near Viper Island. He also met another Jarawa who exchanged his bow and arrow for a knife. At Dundas Point, he again met the same Jarawa with a woman and a girl and once again found him friendly. However, during the second penal settlement, efforts to establish contacts were unsuccessful. The Jarawas had become hostile. The second penal settlement was established in the year 1858 in Ross Island. Initially, the Jarawas were not impacted by the establishment of the penal settlement. The Great Andamanis also had to suffer due to the penal settlement. There were frequent incidents of fighting. The British were trying to make reconciliatory approaches towards the Great Andamanis and not towards the Jarawa. The British started a home called the Andaman Home for their experiment with the tribes in 1863 when they came to know of the Jarawa. They took help of the Great Andamanis and the armed police. They had several expeditions in which the Jarawa habitat was invariably attacked and damaged. Consequently, the Jarawas also retaliated whenever they could in self-defense. Thus, the Jarawa attacked only to safeguard their own interests to protect themselves from the outsiders. There were cases of continuous molesting of the Jarawa and the inciting of coastal Andamanis against them that triggered off the Jarawa offensive. Cipriani in the year 1966 wrote, "It was our fault if the Jarawa became hostile." Sarkar in the year 1990 further gives chronological anecdotes to show how the outsiders from the time of the British were responsible for attacks on the Jarawa, their murders and the destruction of the Jarawa habitat.
Encroachment on their territory was a provocation and resulted in fighting.
During the time of the British regime, there was a lot of encroachment and deforestation. The Jarawa were afraid that this would threaten their very survival. Hence, they were hesitant to accept any offer from the civilized world. The British used their tactics of divide and rule. They manipulated the hostility between the Jarawa and the Onge, or between the Jarawa and the Great Andamanis. The Great Andamanis took advantage of the firearms provided by the British to settle scores with the Jarawas. A large number of Jarawas were invariably killed and their habitat damaged in every expedition. The hatred of the Jarawa towards the outsiders increased due to the Japanese occupation between 1942 and 1945 and indiscriminate bombing and firing in several parts of these islands, including the Jarawa territory, damaging their habitat.
Could you explain about the Jarawa Reserve Forest?
Sure. After the independence in 1947, the practice of expeditions was abandoned and about 765 square kilometers of the South and Middle Andaman forest was declared as Jarawa Reserve Forest. The idea was to provide them with their own area for their hunting-gathering economy and also to give them some protection. The Jarawa had no knowledge of it. They felt provoked by several developmental activities. With a view to make them self-sufficient in the matter of food, the policy of colonization of these islands was adopted. The central government accepted the West Bengal government's proposal to rehabilitate the displaced persons in the Andaman Islands from East Pakistan. About 178 families came into the islands in 1949 and settled down in the Andamans. In 1950 and 51, 2 more batches were brought to settle down in the vicinity of the Jarawa area. The new settlements made the Jarawas insecure and suspicious about the outsiders. The outsiders encroached the Jarawa land, but the minority Jarawa had no way of protesting. As a result, there were constant tensions between the Jarawas and the settlers.
Hostility and encounters between Jarawas and outsiders.
According to Census of India 1961, about 86 cases of the Jarawa raids between 1946 and 1963 were reported. In these raids, in 10 cases, 14 non-Jarawas lost their lives, and in 3 cases, 5 Jarawas were killed and 3 captured. There is an interesting account of the 11th January 1952 incidents at Lagda Lungta by S.K. Gupta in Census of India, year 1951. According to Gupta, the Jarawa did not shoot before they were shot at and came out in the open in front of the camp where there were 4 bush policemen. This is quite contrary to their ambushing habits. This resentment has, however, been described as incorrect by A.K. Ghosh, Chief Commissioner. According to him, the Jarawas were in bark armor and were evidently scouts. As soon as they were sighted, they shot arrows at the policemen, slightly injuring one of them. When the police fired, one Jarawa dropped dead while others ran away injured into the forest. According to Gupta, the Jarawa came out in the open early morning and walked right into the camp, making no attempt to shoot, indicating of their friendly visits. His explanation is that after the 1949 incidents, the Forest Department bottled them between Louis Inlet and Lagda Lungta on the west and in a zigzag along Yaratil Jig to Rangat and Happy Valley to the east, very narrow at certain points. This restricted the existence for people who had been moving within 25 miles of Port Blair. There was an overture for peace, but this shooting of the Jarawa might in all probability stiffen them up. Cases of the Jarawa attacks after independence mostly occurred close to their territory. Large number of laborers came into Jarawa land for the construction of the Andaman Trunk Road through South Andaman. The whole area was disturbed by felling of trees, blasting by explosives and construction of labor camps. Many outsiders came into their territory and they had only 2 options, either to surrender to the larger society or to continue fighting ferociously for their own survival. The bush police, who were to protect the settlers from Jarawa raids, were also friendly with the Jarawas area of Middle Andaman. They dropped gifts like coconut, pieces of iron, strips of red cloth, and so on. During the second and subsequent 5-year plan, provisions were made for continuing such practice of dropping the gifts in the Jarawa areas. In 1968, 3 Jarawa boys were captured near a village in Kadantala and were brought to Port Blair. They were treated well for about a month and then set free near their area with a large quantity of gifts. Some 20 Jarawa men came down to Kadantala from the nearby forests. Their intention was to take away iron tools like agricultural implements, nuts, bolts of doors. They were also looking for coconuts and bunch of bananas. They were unarmed. When the dogs barked in the middle of the night, the villagers got up. All except 3 escaped. Next day, they were brought to Port Blair and kept there for a month under the observation of 2 anthropologists of the Anthropological Association of India, ASI. They were released with gifts, including a pig. There were some successes in befriending the Jarawas in the course of time. For instance, in February 1974, due to the efforts of a contact party led by the bush police, a Jarawa man swam across and came on board and collected the gifts. Thus, there was a breakthrough, but occasionally there were some setbacks as well due to the misdeeds by poachers in the Jarawa area. After the breakthrough in February 1974, there were at least 3 major incidents of the killing of poachers by the Jarawas. In March 1977, 2 Jarawas, one of them with an old punctured bullet wound on his right thigh, expressed their willingness to remain with the contact party. They were brought to Port Blair and kept in the government guest house. They were taken to different places in Port Blair. On 7th February 1977, they were taken back to Yeditha Point near Chotalingbang Bay when they expressed their desire to return. On their return, the 21 Jarawa who were on the shore embraced them. They embraced their respective female partners and children. They displayed pleasure and affection on being reunited with their loved ones, and there was happiness all around. In spite of these breakthroughs, there were skirmishes every now and then due to some unpleasant happenings or unwarranted provocations.
After narrating the sequence of events that perpetuated distrust among the Jarawas towards the outsiders can be summarized as follows.
Should I summarize with your permission?
Yes, permission granted.
On the basis of the above experiences with the Jarawas, it is observed that first, the Jarawa were not unfriendly and hostile towards the outsiders by nature. Second, they felt threat to their survival due to the indiscriminate clearing of the forest during the second penal settlement. Third, the efforts to capture the Jarawa either as part of punitive measure or for befriending them were made with the help of the great Andamanis with whom the Jarawa had traditional rivalry. Thus, they became non-acceptable to the Jarawa. Fourth, a number of measures for development such as road construction, clearance of forests, etc. adversely affected the Jarawas. Fifth, provocative incidents in the Jarawa territory was the prime cause of tension. Thank you.